sure that
It's
it's
okay to be wrong sometimes. Well, not all the time, though.
Oh, that's good there.
I don't understand. I mean, I understood what you wanted.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Today we have Heather Zajicek here, and she helped us out last year. She did a really nice job, so you guys make sure you listen and remember that I'm gonna be sitting back there, and if you ask a question, I'm gonna make a mark so you can have extra 5 points. And Heather would really appreciate conversation. I think that's how we get the most out of when we have guest speakers here, is just kind of picking their brain as they're going through it afterwards. So think about it, write down your questions, and then throw them out at the end. But she's also so previously she was the head high school softball coach at WSR. She is currently the aquatics coordinator here at the W, and she is also the director of the Try by Night. And you're the one that created it? No. Okay.
I wasn't.
But now you're
thrown into it 2 months before the race and when Aaron
oh, and that's
It's
how
like
things
here.
happen sometimes.
do.
Do that.
Yeah.
So anyway, take a listen, ask your questions, and yeah, learn a few things.
Okay. So welcome. You guys are just loving your semester so far. We're what, 3 weeks in? Okay, settling in, kind of, sort of. If your guys' schedule is anything like mine, you look at the calendar and like, how in the world are we almost to the end of January? It's flying by, but I always think that's a good way. I'd rather have things flying by than being really slow, because that's kind of boring. But Jen had asked me, or Coach Walker had asked me to talk about youth club development, and so I'm going to touch on youth club development, but I'm also going to talk a little bit about coaching philosophy, because that ties into like why you would want to develop a club. Kind of go through a little history, but first, you guys have something to like write with or type on your phone or in your head. I guess it doesn't really matter. Hopefully you're able to remember these questions, because we're gonna do a little sharing. Like Jen mentioned, I don't like standing up here and talking at you. I like to have some dialogue along the way. And if people aren't willing to speak, I'm definitely gonna pick on the people I know in this class, and I only know a few of you. But I do have a seating chart, so I can randomly just call out a name. But 4 questions. You're all gonna have an opportunity to talk. I wanna know your name, and then your hometown / high school, okay? Where are you from? And then thinking about what was your first time you've been involved or around sport. We're not gonna share that necessarily, but just think about that point in time in your life. When was your first time coaching? I guess if you've ever coached, but also don't think of it as like, I got paid to coach. Like, it could be working with a rec team. Those of you that run sports camps, that's coaching, right? It could be helping coach a friend in class, you know? So coaching doesn't have to be just sport coaching. It can be life coaching too, okay? And then why do you coach / why do you play a sport? Because it looks like the majority of you in here are athletes, okay? So think about that quick, and then we will start. I want to know your guys' name, hometown, and high school, and we'll start with Nick, because I know Nick's name, and we'll just go around the room.
I'm Nick. I'm from Waverly. I went to Waverly Shell Rock.
Let's just go through, why do you coach play a sport? Or why did you? If you're not currently an athlete, why did you?
Why I coach is because I try to get back to the community of what they spent all their time coaching me, so I felt that it was nice to get back to them.
Okay. Cool.
Cole Wieners, I'm from Fairmont, Minnesota. I'm from Fairmont High School. And I coach and play sports for the Connections.
Okay. Jacob.
Jacob Moore from Baltimore, Maryland. I'm reading classic because they pulled me
Okay. No.
Name is Mo. From Des Moines. I went to Hoover High. I want to be coach. I find it interesting.
Morgan Caffrey, I'm from Boone. I went to Boone High School. And I coach to help like people find love for their sport.
My name is Hannah Feynman. I'm from Piasta. I went to Western Dubuque, and I think coaching is fulfilling.
I'm Addison. I'm from Athens, Iowa, and went to Benton
through Iowa, and then I like to coach because I've had good and bad coaches, so I want to give kids a good experience like that one.
Okay, you would've went to Edco,
I went to West Elwood.
Westover?
Indeed, Martin from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I play sport because I like to work hard. I'm very competitive.
Okay, what high school did you go to?
Cedar Rapids Prairie.
Parker, I'm from Hawaii, went to Line High School, and I want to coach just for the relationships with my students.
What high school did you say?
Line High School.
Okay, yep.
Reese, went to West Ridge High School and play sports because it's fun.
I'm Cade, I'm from Waverly, went to Waverly High School, and I want to coach to stay involved in football and stay around sports in general.
Leo Dodd, I'm from Janesville, and I also always play sports because they're fun.
I'm Blake from Atkins, Iowa, went to Benton Community. Why do you want to coach? Just build the relationships with students.
I'm Rory. I'm from Manly, Iowa. I went to Central Springs High School, and I want to coach to help people reach their goal.
I'm Dakota, I'm from Decorah, and I went to Decorah High School, and I like to play sports to make connections and be with friends.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Ellie Meyer. I went to Iowa Falls Falls High School. I want to coach just to give other people the opportunities and create relationships that I did.
Okay,
I'm Bert Cortez. I'm from Lone Tree, Iowa. I went to Lone Tree High School. I want to coach to see athletes develop into more than just someone who's good at their sport, more of like a holistic view of people in general.
My name is Shane Erb. I'm from Marion. I went to Marion High School. I run because I love it, and I want to coach because I want to be the type of coach that I wish I had when I was growing up in the sport.
I'm Sam. I went to Johnson. I'm from Johnson High School. And I like to run because I like to be challenged.
I'm Kylie. I'm from Mineral Point, Wisconsin. Went to Mineral Point High School. I want to coach because I want to give back to the community and the programs and create like a safe environment for the growing sport of girls wrestling.
I'm Brandy. I'm from Pleasant Hill. I went to Southeast Bowl High School. And I want to coach just to give back to the sport.
I'm Ellery. I'm from Glenwood City, Wisconsin. Went to Glenwood High School, and I just like being in the environment of like sports.
Okay, thank you guys for sharing that information. So I'll answer kind of what I asked you guys to do. So I grew up, I went to a small school, Turkey Valley High School. It's kind of why I asked you guys where you're from. I like to get an idea of just like, are we small school, big school, middle of the road? Like where did we all come from? Because I think that's important, what shapes kind of like our values and why we want to do what we want to do. And so softball was my thing. Being from a small school, those of you that were at a small school, I would imagine you were involved in anything and everything, whether it was sport, drama, speech, choir, band, the whole gamut. I was that kid, but softball was always the thing that stuck with me, and it was mainly because of my mom who played slow pitch, and we would always like play in the backyard on Sundays. You know, my mom, she's probably older than I would say all of your parents, but that was before Title IX, right? And so, I don't know, how many of you know what Title IX is? Okay, so a decent number of you. So Title IX is like equity, whether it's in sport, education, huge for females. So that was even, before her time. So her way to be able to be in sport, she wasn't allowed to be on a high school team, nor did they have many at her time because her parents made her farm. Okay, so her way to be involved in sport was, the old school, I call it, the beer league softball, but that's what she did with her friends. My first time coaching was when I was a sophomore in high school, coaching my brother's Little League baseball team. So if it's anything, how I remember, coaching him is a lot like coaching my daughter, okay? They don't want to listen to you anymore. You're not cool, mom doesn't know what she's doing, sister doesn't know what she's doing, but nonetheless, that was my first time coaching. And then why coaching? It started as a summer job. It was a little way to make some money, but then it was, I fell in love, okay? a lot of you said it was the relationships, and I think that's huge today, and it's still huge. You know, part of my life, my softball teammates, especially from Wartburg College, I played softball here, they're my best friends still to this day, okay? And I graduated, oh geez, this spring it'll be 21 years ago. Ugh, that's scary. But it's those friends, it's providing the opportunities. You guys that said, you know, you want to give back and provide opportunities to kids, that's huge. Like you guys as young professionals, I love getting young people involved with the sport of softball, okay, or any sport in general, but softball is kind of, like I said, where my wheelhouse is. For love of the game, okay, right? We wouldn't be sitting here at Wartburg College putting in the time that we do with our sport if we didn't love it, right? We don't get paid to be here, we don't have big NIL deals. It's a lot of time and commitment, not only to our sport, but to our academics, right? So you gotta love it. And then a huge theme that came up with you guys is giving back. And that's a huge thing when we talk about developing a club. So today we're gonna talk a little bit, chatted about my story, but coaching philosophy, how to develop a club, and then questions. And that my story, that's from me playing Little League. Kind of fun. And I do like to share pictures. Okay, it's a lot better than words, but so my story, I started out Little League, right? Baseball, then transitioned to softball, okay? My first coaching gig was, my second coaching gig was coaching high school softball. When I was a sophomore here at Wartburg, I was able to be an assistant coach back at my hometown. I'm sure a lot of you know, for those of you out of state, I was still the only state that plays summer baseball and softball, right? And so it's very hard to keep tenured coaches in that position because a lot of teachers don't want to spend their summer coaching, right? They kind of went into teaching so they could have the summer off. So you do see a lot of younger people coaching in the summer. Then I evolved into the head coaching role there. I graduated from college. I actually was an assistant coach here right away after I graduated from Wartburg for a few years. I got out of coaching for a little bit, got convinced to go back into coaching at WSR, and then I've since stepped away from coaching high school softball, and now I coach my daughter and coach travel softball. So I've been in a lot of different roles, but they're all for varying reasons, and I think you find that in your life too, like what stage of life are you in, okay? Right now I got a fifth grader who's, my schedule, I say I have 2 full-time jobs. My first one is to work and try to get my work done here, and then the minute I pick my daughter up from school, it's like another 40 hours of like, where are we going? What do we got today? Is it pitching lesson? Are we going to strength and conditioning? Do we have dance? Are we going to wrestling practice? Like, oh, it's volleyball season. Like, what do we got going on? So, kind of the two full-time jobs I have. Well, then the third, like, you know, try to be a good wife, try to keep the house under control, but kind of gets thrown to the side, and then I get mad that stuff's not put away, and then, you know, everybody's like, oh God, we better pick up, or mom are gonna lose her mind again. But anyway, so that's a little bit about me. Coaching philosophy. You guys gotta think, what is important to you? Okay, what is important to you? Some of you, you know, threw out there what is important to you. Somebody mentioned, I want to be the coach that I wish I had growing up, okay? So what is that? Why is that important to you? Was it because I had such a bad experience, I don't want to have that happen to other kids? Or is it, man, my high school coach was awesome and I want to be just like them, okay? We all kind of have our story, right? So thinking kind of 4 objectives I like to talk about are, you know, first, like what are our objectives of purpose? Like why are you here? I mean, I think you can ask that in anything you do. Like, why are you in this class? Probably because you guys need to take it to fulfill a component of a major, right? That's probably a lot of our classes here at Wartburg. What is your approach to coaching? How do you like to coach? Third, what are your values? Like, what are important to you? Okay, I think you can ask your coach, you can ask a professor, like what do you value, what is it of importance to you, and you need to know that, okay, and you need to know that so you can stay on your arrow and kind of stay grounded in who you are. And then what are your principles? And then, again, back to what is important to you, what is your number 1, okay? Mine is always like, how do I build my team? And that doesn't mean my daughter's 11U softball team. When I say build my team, that is like me, who are my mentors, who are people I go to, who do I ask questions to, who's gonna help me stay grounded, and who I need to be on the field, on the court, on the mat, for your team, okay? So ask yourself, what is your number one? Okay, what's most important to you? And then, I always feel like, you probably can't read the right-hand side very well, but do you guys talk about coaching philosophies in here? Or is somebody coming to talk about that?
Yeah, we're in process.
Or we're doing it later on? Okay. So I'm not gonna spend a lot of time, but I feel like your coaching philosophy is always evolving. Okay, if I was to go back in my sophomore year of high school, go back to my coaching philosophy that I had to write for my weekend class that I had to take at Kirkwood to get my coaching authorization, I can guarantee it's nowhere near what it is today, right? When I was a sophomore in high school, God, how old was I? I don't know, how old are you?
16.
15, 16. I was definitely on the younger side. I didn't turn 17 till I was a senior. I didn't even turn 18 till I got to college. I was really young, but gotta kind of have staff standards as well. So teach. When you build your team, who can teach things? Okay? Sorry, I'm going back to baseball and softball because that's what I know. Or even football, you have your position coaches, right? In baseball, you have your pitching coach, you got your defensive coach, offensive coach. I mean, track, you got your hurdlers, your jumps, your distance. Like one coach, we can't expect to be a wizard at all things, right? You gotta find your team that can, just like wrestling, right? You got your little guys, your middleweight, your upper weights. You don't want your upper weights coach coaching the little guys, right? Anyone think that would be good? I don't know. No? Be a bad thing? Who is your guys' upper weights coach? Todd, okay. There we go. My other standard is like hard work and team first mentality. I want people on my team that are gonna be willing to work hard. Not just show up and like say I'm a part of a staff. You gotta want people in your organization that are gonna wanna work hard, not only for you, but those around you. You know, they have pride for your program, for your organization, and then relationships. They're good at relationship building. What can we do to make kids believe? Okay, how can we trick them? That gets thrown around a lot with people I talk, like how can we trick them? Okay, that's every day I go into a pitching workout with my daughter. I'm like, oh great, she's gonna bitch. She's gotta do heavy ball drill today and it's 44 pitches and it's gonna be the end of the world. But the way I trick her is she gets to listen to music. Play some playlist that you like. And every day I'm like, oh, that music's terrible, but whatever. If that's what's gonna get you to do your workout, I'll listen to the music that you wanna listen to. So how can we kind of trick our athletes? And then being able to have some handbooks, philosophies, drills, etc. At your disposal. But when you guys get there. So coming up with some program standard successes, you know, I mentioned those, you guys can read them on the left-hand side, or the top left up there. But a huge thing, you know, that I would say early on as a young coach, teenager, like respecting the game, okay? It's kind of important, but I would say I was a little sassy, like didn't care about it, but it does matter, right? And I even find myself today kind of having to like reel myself in, because if people aren't calling the game correctly, they make a wrong call, and I know it's wrong, like I'm gonna get excited, just like your coaches are, because they're gonna fight for you, right? They wanna fight for their team. But we also need to remember, like, we have to have that level of respect for the game as well, okay? And then coming up, we called it, at WSR, I still use it today when I'm coaching our youth, but like, what's your winning formula? We found that if we had our pitchers and catchers throwing 65% first pitch strikes, we issued less than 4 walks in a game and didn't allow delayed steals. That was an issue on us, that we'd be sitting pretty good at winning the game, okay? Our offensive philosophy, there's tons out there, but ours was like, we're just gonna attack the zone. We're not gonna talk about looking low in, low out, like just attack a pitch. Whatever pitch you think is like a strike, you attack it. Don't second guess. Defense, okay, we want it less than 2 errors, and then base running, we want it to be as aggressive as possible. So coming up, like, what are your standards? How are you going to be successful? So then having all of that, right, I move into, when I was at Turkey Valley, we did our like youth, Little League I would call it, was just each town. So Turkey Valley was made up of 7 different communities, okay? Some of you, I know Benton, there's a lot of schools, even Western Dubuque, different communities. They each had their own, like, Little League. It was just ran however the town wanted it. There was no, like, consistency. I started coaching here at WSR. They had rec programming, and that was it, which was fine, but there was nothing consistent that was helping build, like, a feeder program up to the high school level. So I knew that we needed to develop a youth club, okay? The baseball side of things, so the baseball coach at the time was Coach Klunder, who's now here. He had established a baseball club here at WSR. So I was like, okay, like that dude needs to be on my team. I need to figure out, like, how did you get this to go? How did you get people to buy in? Who do I need to talk to? And one of the biggest things when we first met was you need to strive to meet the needs of all of your athletes, okay? Just because, I gotta look here, Cole and Nick like want to be a part, but like Cole right now is this great baseball player and Nick maybe touched a baseball for the first time. We never wanted our kiddos to think that Nick was any less than Cole, okay? We wanted to make sure that there was a place for every single person in our organization. Shane?
I would ask, like, how would you strive to meet the needs of an athlete put under your supervision if you don't have the expertise? Like, you know you don't have the expertise to give them what they need.
So then that's where I would go back to, you need to find people to be on your team that can help fill that void, okay? And if you still have that question after we talk through a couple more slides, let's go back to that, okay? So developing a club, like where in the world do you start? That was when I first talked to Coach Plunder and like, well, how do you get this thing going? Like I see where you're at right now, but this club started 3 years ago. I know I can't start at year 3, like what does year 1 look like? Okay, so first thing you gotta look like, what exists? Okay, what's happening in your school, what's happening in your community? Are you a small school versus a big school? And I only say that that matters because, like I mentioned earlier, small school, you have kids that need to get to do everything. Like in order for some small schools to survive, they have to have all of their athletes play every single sport. Those of you that said you're from Southeast Polk, Johnston, you know, Marion, maybe you're getting a little bit more specialized, like you don't need everybody to play every single sport. Maybe you need kids to play 2 or 3, but you don't need them to play 4 or 5 or be in 4 or 5 different things in your school to make it a go. So where are you at? What exists? And then what's your budget like? Okay, high school budgets, I would imagine still stuck, okay? I would even argue our budgets here aren't great. They're better than what they were, but still don't meet the needs of what we need to function at a highly successful level like Warburg does, right? I would even argue like any of our schools, like they don't have the budget dollars to put in what they necessarily want or need. So, but find out, like, what does your budget look like, right? Does your school have a booster club? Okay, I think a lot of schools, I believe, still have booster clubs. Okay, athletic booster clubs that help all organizations, like they're not just tiered towards one sport. But then you also can have separate booster clubs. Like I know in Waverly, like they have their football gridiron club, they have the Waverly Area Wrestling Club, there's the volleyball club, there's the softball club, so there's branches off of that. But when I was coaching at the high school level, I had my booster club money and I still had my youth club money as well. And then putting that together, you're able to do some pretty cool things. Okay, so then again, Shane, back to your like, how do I find people? It's like, how can I be creative with maybe some funds that I can find somebody like Sam, who might be an expert that I need, how can I bring him along, okay? Then, again, mentors, I mentioned that, like, who's on your team? Like, you need to start developing a circle, okay? And I would argue this doesn't, no matter if it's youth level, high school, college, you gotta have a circle, right? You gotta have people that you can go and talk to. You need to have conversation, okay? Maybe they're not even a coach. Like, I don't think everybody you talk to has to be a coach. You know, maybe it goes back to it's a principal, or it's somebody, a leader of a company, or honest to God, maybe it's the maintenance guy at your school. But they're able to just be able to provide different insights to help mentor. And then time, it takes time. As much as I wanted to be at year 3 with Plunder, I knew I had to be at year 1, okay? And that stunk because I'm like, oh my God, the girls are behind, like the girls need to play catch up, like we need to get going. But again, a club doesn't develop overnight, it develops over time, okay? And then the third thing is, you know, what are programs you want to look like? Who are they? Okay, so at WSR, I was like, who are programs in the state of Iowa that I think do a really great job of running youth organizations and have some pretty great high school programs as well? Like Fort Dodge was one. Okay, Andy had an awesome youth program and it went all the way up to the high school level. Okay, Nikki down at Cedar Rapids Xavier, same thing. She had a youth feeder program that went right into her high school club. West Des Moines Valley, Tom down there, like again, great youth club up into, and I mentioned all those are bigger schools, but I was trying to find like schools. Waverly was a 4A softball school. Who can I pick brains? I didn't know any of them, but just pick up the phone. The worst they're gonna do is like, I don't have time, or they're not gonna answer an unknown number. You leave a message, and if they call you back, you either are like, well, I give up, move on, or you just keep bothering them, okay? And, you know, programs here in WSR, like, I loved what Coach Plunder was doing. I somehow got to be good chatty friends with Coach Wickham in the wrestling program, so those two right there were like kind of my 2 guys that I went to how do I help develop a club, okay? Because they both had successful clubs of their own. And then how do they operate? Figuring out, you know, what is the function? Is it the coach doing it all, or is it finding people? What do you guys think? Finding people, okay? Because if you try to do everything yourself, you're gonna burn out. You'll be great at it for a while, but then you're gonna be like, man, I can't keep doing this anymore, it's a lot. So, finding the right people. So, Waverly, softball, yeah, Mom?
I was gonna say, like, what steps do you take to find the right people?
Let me keep talking through this here. No, you're good. So Waverly actually had an adult softball league, okay? They still do, but with that adult softball league, we wanted to be able to be a nonprofit. So Plunder actually, they developed their youth club under the adult softball umbrella. So we developed our softball club under that 501c3 model as well. Okay, so we were under that umbrella organization. So we didn't have to go through all the paperwork to be a part of that, okay? Wrestling is the same thing. They're their own club. They have, you know, the board meetings to go with it. And I'm not quite sure on the football side of things. I don't know if either of you guys know that at all, but a lot of club organizations will deem themselves a nonprofit and go through the paperwork, but there's stuff you gotta do for that. So adult softball, then it was baseball. They were a youth development club, and from that they had rec and competitive. So when I started out year 1, Clutter was on year 3, he already had like a developmental club and he already had the competitive. Softball only had rec, okay? And again, that goes back to, you gotta have a place for every athlete. Not every person, not every kid, not every family wants to be competitive, or they don't wanna travel, okay? So you gotta have that baseline. Because I'm gonna tell you, like, my daughter started out, like, I wouldn't put her in travel stuff, mainly because my schedule wouldn't allow it, but rec served her purpose, right? Just like I think we can go through, and how many of you were ever in like a rec programming? Your YMCA, your local town, okay? A lot of you in some shape or form, okay? Started out as rec. then, you know, Mo, it was kind of like, who do we want to become? We were thinking a little bit like, what did we want to do? We wanted to be able to support rec and competitive. We knew that we wanted to have more competitive because we wanted more competitive athletes coming up in our high school softball program, okay? When I first took over, like I had 8th graders that didn't understand basic concepts of softball. That is problematic, okay, when you're at a 4A school, okay, with lots of resources, not knowing just kind of the basics of the game. So we kind of knew we needed to have something for kids that maybe wanted more instead of having them like leave town, okay, because there were some kids that were leaving town. And then we wanted to be able to provide opportunities in the spring, fall, or summer, and in the fall. Okay, up until that time, they only did stuff in the summer. Softball was only a thing May and June, okay? Most states, again, like I mentioned, they have spring softball, so they're starting in February, March, somewhere in that realm. We wanted to be able to provide our young ladies with indoor and outdoor opportunities. We wanted to be able to mentor young girls, okay? And just having that uniform system feeder program right into the high school program. So now when our kids are done with youth ends at 7th grade, when they go to 8th grade and they get up to Coach Meyer, like, we want to be like, hey, we got this girl, like, kind of as complete as she's going to be right now. You kind of just take her away and finish out her years. We wanted to be able to host our own tournaments here. How many of you have seen our nice complex that we have? It's what, 7 fields. Okay, so we're fortunate. That was like 15 years in the making, I feel like, but nonetheless, we have it now. Community involvement, okay? So how do you get some people involved? Kiwanis and Exchange Club. Those are 2 service organizations we have in Waverly that I'm sure exist in a lot of other towns. They're service-based. They want to get involved with youth. We actually work with them all the time, okay? The Exchange Club gives us money every year. They help host raffles. Our Kiwanis guys, they run our concession stand for us. So it's just groups of people that do not have kids in the program anymore that are helping young people because they care about young people. And then needed to have board involvement, okay? So again, how do we find people, Mo? Okay, a lot of it is, that's where you need to continue to develop your circle. Who do you know? Okay, I was very fortunate to be in Waverly that I had former athletes that were close in the area, people that worked at Warburg, that I would just ask like, hey, you've played softball before, would you like to get involved in coaching youth? And then from there, they maybe knew a couple other people, and then it just kind of trickles around. We're very spoiled in Waverly that we have like the campus to be able to like pull coaches from. I know our youth club we've pulled several coaches from Warburg, whether they're former softball student athletes, current softball athletes, people that want to get involved in coaching. When Coach Connor and I were still coaching high school, we would always get an intern from Warburg to help us do stuff. So it was, again, just utilizing the resources we had to help make the machine go. But our board involvement, like I mentioned, we have that top 501c3, okay, with the adult softball people. Then we have our next board, which is the second one, okay, and then we have our youth baseball, softball subcommittees, and it's just broken up into a bunch of different things. Because before we had this, it was like Coach Clunder was trying to do it all, I was trying to do it all, and you just can't do it all. Okay, so breaking up any of the youth boards that I sought out, Fort Dodge, Cedar Rapids Xavier, West Des Moines, they all kind of had structures like that. So again, I'm not saying this is how it has to look, but it's just kind of how we were able to make it look. And then again, now as just being a part of the youth, we're asking questions of our high school coaches. Like, who are people you maybe know you're using that we can get involved in our organization? And again, all these people do all this work for free. Okay? So you somehow got to convince people that this is worth their time. Okay? And I'm going to tell you it's worth all of our times because all of our kids are in it. Okay? So again, a lot of your boards are going to start with parents, and we are at the time now that a lot of the women, the females that are a part of softball right now, they're former athletes themselves, which I think is huge, okay? Last year, we only had one male coaching any of our youth kids on the competitive side. Nothing against you guys. I'm sure you do a great job coaching, but that was one thing we wanted to make sure we had female faces in front of our female kids, our girls. Because like when I was growing up, I never had a female coach. I didn't have a female coach till I was a senior in college, which is wild to think of now because it's more of, you know, a norm to have a female coach wanting to go coach. Okay. So then thinking too, the next step would be, you know, growth. How are we going to grow? Because again, we can't start where we want to end. So what are some steps? We had a 3-phase approach. So we sat down and we're like, okay, begin with the end in mind. What do we want the end to look like? And then what are some steps we're going to take to get there? So phase 1 was establishing a youth club. That was honestly really easy because people are like, oh yeah, like the girls need to catch up with these boys. We are not letting our girls in the dust. Like we need to make sure they have the same opportunities that our boys in this town have. So we expanded our traditional summer programming and we started to offer open gym time January or February, March, and April. Okay, that was where we started. It was really little, and we were so excited about it. We're like, yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so phase 2 was like implementing common practices. So heavy involvement at the time from the high school staff. My staff that I had 4 female assistants. Again, Shane, you asked, how do you find people, right? It was my connections from coaching here, pulling some people that I knew in the community had a passion for youth, maybe weren't always as savvy on the softball side, but they knew how to relate to kids, okay? And pulled them, and we were able to help coach them up in areas that they felt confident in, and we used some booster club money, some fundraise money to help fund positions, because a lot of times you get your head coach and your assistant coach. I'm gonna tell you, in any sport, 2 coaches is not enough, especially with young kids. I mean, I feel like at times we need a 1-on-1 ratio with the little crazy people running around, but heavy involvement from the high school staff. We were using the same offense, defense, pitching philosophies. My staff at that time led all of our open gyms. So from February to spring break, the high school coaches were working with the little kids and our high school athletes, and they thought that was really cool. I know at WSR, for wrestling, there's a lot of high school kids that help work the youth clubs. So I think that's huge. Just even like you guys think like you have a summer football camp. When kids get to work with people that are closer to their age than like their adults, they think that's really cool, right? Again, Kylie, you talked about, you know, mentoring young women wrestlers. Like, certainly I know Jake and Alex know what they're talking about with wrestling, but I'm gonna tell you, my daughter is gonna listen to you over these 2, even if you didn't know anything, just because you already have something in common that you're the same gender, okay? And that's important. Like, know your audience, okay? And then 3 was the competitive expansion, okay? After the 2nd year, we toyed around. We had 1 competitive team, okay? Now we have 6, okay? We're serving over 140 girls. Okay, and that number when we first started was, maybe 60. So just like, how can you expand your reach, okay? And I feel like being able to offer some different programming helps in that regard. Baseball side, they have so many little boys that are out for baseball. They actually have 3 tiers of play. They have their rec, they have what they call rec plus, and then they have competitive. So like rec is just their town base, they're just playing in town. Rec Plus is they're playing their midweek games, but maybe they're just dabbling in a 50-mile radius of some town baseball tournaments on the weekend. And then their travel, maybe they're going more towards the Des Moines, Iowa City, Quad City area. Where softball, we only have, because our numbers just for girls is just less, that's just, I mean, how it is. We have our rec based and then we have our competitive level. And this year we'll actually have one of our rec teams that will operate more like a rec plus, they'll play in a couple local tournaments, like they'll go over to Wapsie Valley, which is right down the road, over to Clarksville, which is right down the road. But again, trying to provide opportunities for a broad spectrum of athlete. Any questions with that? Hi, Keyshawn.
What's your like thoughts on playing up? Like obviously, like when you have 140 people, you don't really have that purpose. But like when we have smaller groups, and there's a lot of times kids want to play up, and then they let them, and then the other kids kind of like, why didn't I play up?
Why they didn't what?
Why did I not get to play up while he got to play up? You know?
I will tell you from experience, it's a very, very slippery slope, right? So there's kind of two things to look at. If a kid plays up, what does that do for the group below them? Does that kind of put them out of being able to play? Two is like, is that kid really have the skill set that they should be playing up? Okay, because every parent is going to tell you, I hear this every day, oh, my kid is the best swimmer ever. Like they should be, and I'm like, what are you looking at? Like we all kind of have a little bit fogged vision sometimes with our kids, myself included. Sometimes you gotta like reel back in, like where are they really at? So looking at kind of both of those angles, are they ready for that? And is it just a parent or is it like a group of people? So I would encourage, like we've had people assess outside, like our Warburg softball coaches and their athletes do our assessment for our competitive teams. So it's not any parent, it's not any coach. They don't know them from Adam. They're super hard on the evals, but that's okay because it's the same with every, you know. And so bringing in a third party to help assess that. I would say we have found that keeping them at their age, and then if there's not enough at the next level, we have opened up, is there a neighboring town that maybe doesn't have enough that we could combine that way? So there's no right or wrong answer, just kind of live and learn through it. Who else had a question?
How do you like if you start a club, what's like the best way to send out the information to families so that they know it's like you, so like it's becoming like bigger?
Utilize your school. We're very fortunate here in Waverly that if we send it to the middle schools, the elementary schools, St. Paul's, they will send it out in their newsletters. I mean, the great thing is now, like, we get everything electronically, okay? Back when I was, like, student athlete, it was like paper and you hope to God that it got to your parents. You can certainly send home flyers, but I'm gonna tell you, like, I haven't looked at Zoe's backpack since before Christmas. And I'm sure there's stuff that I'm like, oops, missed the deadline there, but it's always double, right? So it doesn't hurt to send it double, whether it's paper, Facebook we use a lot, and just again, the spreading of the word. And if you have a board, you need to encourage your board to start helping spread that message as well.
You kind of already answered, but how would you deal with parents who don't agree with like the process or structure that you're implementing?
Yeah, parents suck, okay, first and foremost, like, and you need to make sure that yourself, you are firm in what you're doing. Like, I get easily excited when somebody's pissed off, but our board president is not that way. So like, I'll first like get excited with him and like, he's gotta kind of be like, okay, ground yourself here a little bit. You know, so again, having those people that you know, like, I will be like, Nick, you need to have that hard conversation, but here are my thoughts. And he'll do that for me. But then there's certain things he's like, I need you to talk to this family because it will come better coming from you than from me. Okay, so you have to expect that parents are always going to question. And sometimes they just want to see how you react, which is kind of a not nice thing, but sometimes that's how we are.
You talked about this a long time ago, but kind of going back to like the boosters, what have you found is like the best way to do fundraising for programs? Because I feel like sometimes it can just feel like a lost cause, like you're just begging people for money.
Yeah, it certainly is tough because it seems like everybody has to raise money right now, right? Everybody needs to raise funds for this, that, and the other thing. And, you know, trying to find ways that are different from other sports. I would say that's one of the cool things in this town. We all try to do different things, and if one organization is doing one thing, we're not gonna try to do that. And with the softball and baseball club, we rely heavily on sponsorships that get used for all of the groups. So it's not like you're just sponsoring my team, and then Nick's finding a sponsor to sponsor his team. We just try to find sponsors, and it sponsors everybody. And then on the back side, we kind of decide like where those funds all go to. But it is tough. Like, if you're like me, like I hate asking people for money. I mean, I'm like, DJ, can we just write a check for this? You know, but sometimes it's really worth your kids a good life skill. And one thing my daughter did 2 years ago for her travel softball team is they had a sheet of paper with softballs on it, and it had different dollar amounts on it. And I'm like, you need to do this. Like, your goal, you need to raise $100. Like, it was minimal, but so I'm like, you need to start talking to people. Like, if you really want to have this experience, you need to be able to talk to somebody of why this is important to you. And so she asked, she got her $100, she got to fill in the softball, and that worked for her. I mean, it may not work, but again, sometimes it's having your kids do things to help them grow as young humans as well.
So, like building a program is challenging in itself. Like, what did you find out was like the most difficult part to like get the ball rolling?
The most difficult part is making sure two things. Making sure you have the coaches that have the best interest in the kids in the program and aren't there just to further their kid along. Okay, I'll use myself as an example. Zoe has touched a softball since she was born, right? I was coaching softball here when she was born. She's been around the sport her whole life. So whether or not she wanted to like softball or not, she was gonna like softball, okay? At least until she tells me she doesn't wanna do it anymore, okay? So it's just been a part of her life. So we at home, we do a lot of things, right? And so I can't ever go in and coach and be like, this is what Zoe needs. Like, you have to look at it, what does this whole team need? And that is different than some days what I feel like my kid needs, okay? So making sure you find coaches that are gonna coach the whole group and not just one kid or like the top tier kid. Gotta be able to coach all of them and figure out, okay, if you're squad of 10 or 11 softball, you know, however many you would have on a soccer, you know, gotta be able to figure out how to coach all of them. Okay, so finding the right coaches. Remind me, what was the question again?
What was the most difficult part?
Difficult. And then getting people on your board that will do stuff. There's a lot of people like, oh yeah, I want to be on a board because they want to be able to tell, oh yeah, I'm on the youth softball board. Okay, but I'm going to tell you, like, there's a lot of things that people wouldn't do, and this is a fault of myself, and you guys got to remember too, you can't do it all yourself. Like, I'd get annoyed, Jacob wasn't doing what he was supposed to, so I'm like, fine, I'll just do it. I mean, that happened to me when I was in group projects in college. Okay, you always have some people in a group, or even on your team maybe, that like, won't pull your weight. So you gotta make sure that your board, your club, everybody has ownership. And like, Nick, when I'm telling you this is your job, you need to do it. Okay, Jake, you need to do this. Connor, this is your job. Like, it's not my job to do all three of their jobs. Because then why do I have the board, right? So you gotta make sure that everybody that's on your board, just like your coaches, are kind of pulling their weight. Connor.
So mine was kind of, you touched on a little bit with like coaching all the kids, but like these smaller towns, there might be a team that's got like 15 or 16 kids. It's kind of that fringe, like, you know, enough for two teams, but everybody's got to be on one team. Then you have those 2 or 3 individuals who've been playing sports their whole lives. How do you kind of ride that line between helping them to continue to develop, but then also that other group that just needs those beginning stages of like sports development
And
without
I think,
pissing parents off?
yeah, that's the key. Don't piss parents off. No, I'm just kidding. I found, so in the fall, when we run our fall softball, we invite everybody. It's competitive, it's rec, it's kids that have never touched the ball before, and let me tell you, it's like herding cats at times, right? Because you have the kid that will throw the ball 50 some miles an hour at you, and then one that can barely overhand throw. So then it comes back to coaching and grouping. You guys talk about like how to practice plan. we did that all fall. Like, okay, here's my top group. Here's my middle of the road group. Here's my, we need to get these kids as far along as possible group. We're doing the same things, but at a level that they can understand. And honestly, like, over the course of our fall, our 6 weeks we had, were those kids at the bottom where the top kids ended up? No, but they were certainly closer. And they felt like, okay, I can play with these kids. And it wasn't going to, nobody was gonna hurt each other at that point in time. But it is tough when you have 15 kids at 15 different skills. I would also tell you, you go to travel for a weekend, okay, you set your schedule, don't take all those kids. I think you can be very upfront with parents and be like, okay, we have too big of a roster. We're not gonna cut kids, so that should excite parents. We're gonna take select rosters every week. And so you can figure out if you're gonna always have, like, these 4 are always gonna be playing no matter what, and kind of rotate the other ones, or in the summer, maybe Jake's on vacation, Nick's on vacation, Alex is on vacation, you know, and then it's kind of like, okay, this kind of works itself out. But having too many kids at a competition or a game is wild, because it gets boring, and then they're like, oh, I hate this sport, and then their parents are like, my kid didn't get to play. So I think that's an easy way to just be upfront. This is, given what we have, we don't want to cut, and I don't think you should cut with youth, right? Like, you want people to be out, but also understanding, like, it doesn't make any sense to have anybody. So last year, club volleyball here at WSR, each team had 12 kids on it. How many kids play volleyball at a time? 6, okay? You put your best server to serve. Let me tell you, do you get around a whole rotation with 4th grade volleyball? No. And then you start that, I mean, so they learned, like, we cannot have this many kids on a team. So this year we went to having no more than 8 on a roster, okay? So it's a little more manageable. So then you kind of just gotta figure out, and then maybe next year you do have enough, or kind of you could also go, like, is there a neighboring town that maybe some kids need a home and we invite them along, and then we do make 2 teams.
But then, I get that, but then also in those smaller towns, parents get turned off by that, then they just stop having their kids play those sports, and then when it comes to high school,
Yeah.
you have 11 kids. on
Yeah,
high school baseball.
it is definitely tough in the smaller schools. So with that, then I would say just do the 15 and kind of rotate some kids through.
What's the, like, craziest thing you've had a parent do? Like, the craziest parent story?
Well, I should remember this, right? We were in a rain delay at WSR, and I was sitting in the dugout with my other coaches, and this, you know this story? Do you? Okay. This dad storms into the dugout, and I'm like, oh shit. Like, we kind of already knew he was, like, rumbling about playing time, and they knew what our philosophy was, okay? And he starts going at it, and I said, I'm gonna stop you right there. This is not the time or place. And of course, my lovely assistant, who could not shut her mouth at the time, just went at it with him. And I'm like, okay, like, I gotta back up my coach, right? Like, I gotta fight for my coach. So that was wild. And it was like standing in between. I'm like, oh God, am I gonna get punched or what's going on? And then it followed up with some meetings with administration, and, you know, she ended up, gosh, I don't even think she ended up continuing playing. And it was, but parents are wild. They're sometimes, even though you have boundaries set, they don't have boundaries themselves. But yeah, that was wild. Haven't had that happen since. Knock on wood.
How do you handle playing time at the youth level? I mean, obviously you have, like, direct league, but if you have more than, like, 9 kids on the team, how do you rotate, or how does Waverly, I guess, handle that?
We really try to not have extra kids on a team, okay? So at 10U and under, you can play 10 on the field, so we don't try to have more than 11. And then we just kind of rotate everybody through. Everybody takes their turn. Now, as they get older, 12U, 13U, 14U, then it becomes like, maybe it's not equal playing time, but everybody's still getting in. And then when they're younger too, we kind of do you need to learn 2 positions. Okay, whether it's like at 10U, we broke it up left side of the field, right side of the field, and then you had your pitchers and catchers. Okay, And then, so they learned a position on the right side of the field and the infield, and then on the outfield. And then same on the left, and really tried to have less kids, so we kept people wanting to go out for softball, because to Connor's point, like, if you're a kid that continually gets sitting on the bench, like, softball, baseball is boring enough at that level when there's not action, that sitting on the bench isn't cool. Like, it's not exciting, and I get it. And that's where softball, baseball, and Iowa, I think, are hard, because it is in the summer. Like, you gotta love it to spend your whole entire summer, you know, out playing that sport. And so really, I think no matter how many kids you have out, trying to have enough opportunities for them, not only in practice, but in games. Do you have a question?
What's your biggest regret looking back on all of your coaching experience?
Biggest regret? I don't know if I have one. I mean, I certainly think there's things that happen along the way, and I don't know if it's a regret, like, kind of, I guess, an eye-opener is like stepping away from things. Like, when I stopped coaching softball here when my daughter was little, like, I thought at the time, like, oh my God, this is so terrible, but like, again, certain things, like, just when I stopped coaching high school, I'm like, oh, this is the end of the world, but like, I look what opportunities I've been able to have, like, it's almost kind of been like a blessing in disguise, per se. I wouldn't say there's regret, just kind of different way to look at it, and kind of like keep doors open, you know, so that maybe when she's out of the house and on her own, like, I can go back and do some things. No.
How do you reflect on your philosophy of coach?
How do I what?
Reflect on your philosophy of coach.
I think it's honestly every year, like, going back and looking at it and be like, okay, was I able to stick true to what I was doing? How did my coaching staff do with it? And sometimes I feel like your coaching philosophy maybe evolves a little bit with over time, you know, with different athletes, different experiences you've had, different networks you've been able to connect. Because just like you guys are students of the game, coaches need to be students of the game too. Like, I'm not doing the same things I did back in 2000 when I was in high school that I'm doing now. Just even over the span of 4 years, like, softball pitching has changed a little bit, okay? Talking through, like, oh, high elbow release to, like, internal rotation. Like, and so you gotta stay up with practices. Like, I don't know any for soccer, track and field, you know, like, I'm not into that world, but there's different philosophies, you know, rotational hitting versus linear hitting, okay? Just different, you know, ways to look at, you know, pitching, analyzing. So continuing to be a student of the game.
Did you ever have like an athlete that like didn't want to be there, or was there because like their parents made them? And if so, like, what did you do with that?
You definitely have that in youth, I will tell you, that kids or parents just sign their kids up to be there. It's tough because obviously those of us that are coaching there, kids that are there, they can recognize that. But I think it goes back to when I was talking with Connor and making those smaller groups. Sometimes they feel better when they're grouped more with people, like either their like skill or just it's smaller so it's not as intimidating. But it definitely is hard, and I wouldn't be afraid to, if it's far enough into practices, have a conversation with the parent, like, hey, this is just what we're seeing, like, am I getting a bad read on this, or is this really, because sometimes it even goes back to different things that are going on in their life, okay? Being able to have those combos. When does this class end?
In about 7 minutes,
Okay.
6 minutes.
So then, I'm gonna challenge you guys to go back. Who's your team? Okay? This is my team. You can tell Coach Clemmer there's a real sweet picture of him. He's gonna be real excited for me. Okay? But to the left is like my parents, grandparents growing up. Okay? My husband and my daughter. Okay? They've got to be on board. If you guys are ever gonna coach, you need to make sure that your significant other, your spouse, whoever you're with at the time is on board with you coaching. Okay? And they need to love it just as much as you do, or it's not gonna work. Okay? Because it's a very rewarding job, but it's not one that has set hours, okay? We don't get paid tons of money, especially when you're coaching at the youth level, right? We're doing it for free, okay? Even, you know, you're not making a ton of money unless you're in the pros, okay, maybe even then you're underpaid. Danny, she's actually our 12U coach. I was fortunate, I coached her here at Warburg. My friends Alicia and Betsy, and those are with our girls up there, so it's always fun to stay connected. Katie, that's the one in the bottom right, she works over in admissions, if you guys know her. She was the one that got real feisty with the dad, so talk to her about that. Can't even remember his first name, but it was our catcher. We'll see what she remembers about it. But it's one of those situations, she's like, I'm sorry I did that, and I'm like, hey, it happened, but then you gotta be able to help back up your coaches, right? You can't just leave them out to die, right? And I talked about Coach Clender, Coach Wickham. Is Coach Wickham coming?
Yep.
To talk in class?
Yep.
Okay, so he'll be here to chat with you guys, but develop your team. Who's on your team? Okay, keep expanding. And then, in summary, it's sweeter when you get to share it with them, okay? So I'm gonna go back to whether it's your family, your parents, your team, okay? It's really cool. I don't know if Zoe will say it's cool that I get to coach her, but it's really fun when you can have your kiddos and your people grow in the thing that you're passionate about, okay? And if any of you ever care about the Women's College World Series, it's a fun atmosphere, okay? Just like, I don't have you guys been to Omaha baseball, okay? Go to your sport, travel, go see the things, take a group of friends. It's really fun thing to do. But that's all I have unless there's any last minute, but I'm right up to time. Thanks for asking
Did great,
questions.
yeah, thank you very much.